One can pretend to be strong, confident, kind, ambitious, disciplined, but there are subtle, precise cues that reveal the truth, and Machiavelli knew how to recognize them. In his circle, full of liars, opportunists, and cowards, he could not afford to guess who was truly strong and who merely proclaimed it loudly. He needed to know for certain, and he quickly realized that weakness does not shout. Instead, it seeps through the cracks. While strong people remain calm in silence, the weak expose themselves through patterns and behaviors that they are often unaware of. And once you learn to notice these patterns in enemies, colleagues, or even in yourself, you will gain an advantage that Machiavelli wielded like a dagger: the ability to recognize weakness before it becomes a threat. These cues do not seem obvious. In fact, most people do not notice them, but not Machiavelli. He studied people like a predator studies movement and discovered 3 behaviors that instantly reveal weak individuals. Let us begin with the first and perhaps the most subtle behavior, which is excessive justification. Weak people explain themselves, while strong individuals make decisions. That is all. A person who constantly defends their decisions, explains their actions too much, or tries to make others understand them, is not confident in themselves. Machiavelli often observed this phenomenon. A confident prince spoke little, while a minister, a merchant, or someone pretending to be important spoke constantly. They needed others to agree with their logic for them to feel confident in it themselves. This behavior belongs to a person whose identity depends on being liked, not feared or respected, but rather loved. And Machiavelli saw the true essence in this. A person begging for permission to exist through excessive justification is a smokescreen for fear: fear of rejection, fear of judgment, fear of power. The truth is that anyone who needs approval before they move forward will never hold true power. Because power requires silence. Power requires conviction. Power requires the ability to take a step without explaining it to anyone. So the next time someone continues to explain their point of view, repeating their arguments, trying to sound reasonable or pleasant or morally right, you will not hear strength. You will hear an internal collapse in slow motion. But that is only the first behavior. The second is even colder. The weapon of kindness is the most dangerous form of weakness because it wears a smile. Machiavelli knew that the most spineless people do not always appear frightened. They look friendly, willing to help, accommodating. But this is not kindness. It is submission disguised as virtue. Indeed, a strong person can be kind, but their kindness is selective, intentional, and never comes at the expense of their self-respect. A weak person, on the other hand, strives to be pleasant at all times. They agree to avoid tension. They give compliments to be loved. He remains silent when he should speak. He apologizes not because he is wrong, but because he is afraid. And when this does not work, when kindness does not bring approval, he changes. He becomes embittered, with a sarcastic, passive-aggressive demeanor. Why? Because his kindness has never been true kindness. It was a strategy to avoid rejection. And when this strategy fails, his true discontent surfaces. Machiavelli constantly studied this in public figures. He wrote that a prince must be able to do evil and refrain from using it unless he is compelled to do so. In other words, restraint is not the same as fear. But kindness, when turned into a weapon, is always a manifestation of fear. It is the posture of someone who cannot stand confidently, so they try to remain unnoticed, hoping that no one will step on them. And when you see such behavior in someone, this compulsive friendliness that turns sour under pressure, you have found a person who cannot be trusted with power. Because true strength requires the ability to set boundaries, to say no without apologies, to face tension without crumbling into false smiles. Machiavelli observed such behavior like a hawk because it told him that this person's loyalty would collapse at the moment of testing. But there is also a third behavior, more desperate, more overtly humiliating to witness. And when you see this, you understand that you are in front of a person who fears being insignificant more than anything else in the world. This third behavior that made Machiavelli instantly categorize a person as weak was the dependency on attention. You have seen this before. A person who always needs to be noticed, someone who cannot sit still without recognition, someone who constantly posts, speaks loudly, exaggerates every victory, and turns every moment into a performance. Machiavelli saw such people everywhere and understood what most people still do not realize. A person who needs recognition fears being forgotten. This fear is a weakness, but not the kind caused by poverty or lack of opportunity. It is a weakness born from the decay of self-worth, because dependency on attention is insecurity. It is a panic reaction from someone who lacks an internal foundation. They think that if they are not talked about, loved, praised, or envied, then they do not matter. Their value disappears the moment attention fades, and that is why Machiavelli considered them a threat. These people will do anything for attention. They will lie, embellish, betray. They will reveal secrets, turn against allies, create enemies out of nothing just to have someone watch. Because in their minds, silence means death. Calmness means insignificance, and the worst fate is to be forgotten. Machiavelli knew that a person dependent on attention is a puppet ready to be controlled. And if you ever want to destroy it, you do not need to attack. Simply ignore it, take away its attention, stop the applause, and make it feel invisible. Watch how quickly it breaks, because while strong people train in silence, grow in solitude, and strike without warning, a weak person cannot survive even 5 minutes without attention. They are easily predictable, even easier to manipulate, and absolutely unreliable. This is why Machiavelli feared weakness more than vice, because at least a vicious person knows what they want, while a weak person craves everything but is willing to give up anything to get it. Combine 3 of their behaviors: obsessive justification, feigned politeness, and a thirst for attention, and we do not get a villain, but merely emptiness. A person so empty that they take the shape of anyone stronger than themselves. It is these people that Machiavelli feared the most: insipid, uncruel, hollow. Because emptiness can be filled with anything, and if the wrong person approaches it, it will be filled with destruction. However, Machiavelli went further. He not only defined weakness but also used it, turning it into tools, predictors, leverage points. He understood that recognizing a weak person early on could mean the difference between power and betrayal, because such people do not break under pressure. They simply melt away. And in politics, in war, in business, and in trust, one cannot rely on someone who melts away. So how can one protect themselves? How to act like Machiavelli. Observe. Stop judging people by their smiles, words, or appearances, and start evaluating them by psychological patterns. Study what they do when no one agrees with them, when no one is watching, when no one praises them, or gives them reasons to behave well. Look for cracks, because a strong person does not panic in silence. They build, refine, and plan, while a weak person performs, explains, and collapses. And once you learn to distinguish this, you will gain a weapon that most people do not even think to sharpen. Insight is the power to see not only who a person pretends to be, but also who they will become once life stops going according to their plan. This is how Machiavelli chose his allies, how he avoided collapse, how he surpassed everyone who was deceived by appearances. Because beneath the right words and carefully crafted behavior, there is never a lie. Machiavelli did not just notice weakness, he turned it into a ladder. While others reacted to weakness with irritation or disgust, Machiavelli acted strategically. Because once you know a person's emotional vulnerability, know how they think, how they panic, how they seek approval, you do not need to argue with them. You do not need to fight. You simply guide them like a rope holding a marionette behind the scenes. He understood something important. A weak person wants to be led, but does not want to feel controlled. Therefore, Machiavelli gave them exactly what they wanted: praise when they were ignored, agreement when they were uncertain, and encouragement when they needed validation. Not because he respected them, but because he saw how easily they could be shaped, and therein lay his true power. He did not rely solely on force. He did not compel anyone to obey. He made the weak submit to themselves by offering them just enough emotional rewards to keep them at a distance from his own disdain. It worked like this. He knew how to find the justifying person who needed everything explained. Instead of challenging him, Machiavelli simply listened. He nodded, looked into his eyes, and spoke. This made complete sense. The oppressed person began to grow attached to Machiavelli, craving even more of that rare approval, ready to defend him, support him, even spy for him. All because Machiavelli made him feel understood, but that understanding was merely manipulation. Then he turned to the people-pleaser, the one trying to be agreeable, helpful, and liked. He gave him work, made him feel chosen, allowed him to experience safety, as if he had finally become part of something powerful. And this person would never betray Machiavelli. Not out of loyalty, but because betrayal would mean losing the only thing that held his fragile identity together. Then there was the attention seeker, the person who needed attention like air. To this person, Machiavelli provided a stage. He allowed him to perform at meetings, to take public credit for ideas that served Machiavelli's goals, to wear the suit of influence. Meanwhile, behind the scenes, it was Machiavelli who wrote the script because he knew. If you give a weak person the illusion of power, he will never question who truly possesses it. This is how empires are built, not through war, not through blood, but through psychological engineering. You identify the weak, then allow them to build an important narrative from their desire to be noticed, approved, and included. And if they ever turn against you, you do not fight back. You simply withdraw your attention. Let them crumble in silence. Let them destroy themselves in a desperate attempt to feel influential again. For nothing destroys a weak person faster than the indifference of the one whose approval shaped him. This is the art of Machiavelli in dealing with weakness. You do not argue. You do not expose them. You use them as weapons, and while they dance in the spotlight, you remain a still, silent observer. While they chase applause, you gain power. But Machiavelli had one more rule, perhaps the coldest of all. Never allow a weak person to believe he is your equal. because the moment he does, he will forget who created him. He will overestimate himself. He will begin to fantasize about rebellion, so you maintain your distance. You reward just enough to keep him moving, but never too much. Not to the extent that he believes he no longer needs you, and if he ever tries to challenge you, you do not respond. You replace him, because there is no shortage of weak people desperately seeking approval. No, but you are one of a kind. This is the way of Machiavelli. It is not about dominating through force, but about guiding through instinct. It is not about controlling people, but manipulating their insecurity, turning it into loyalty. You do not need a title. You do not need a crown. You do not even need to speak loudly to control the weak. All you need is understanding and silence. Machiavelli knew that the best manipulation does not look like manipulation. It looks like friendship. It looks like mentorship. It looks like presence. Because weak people are always watching, not out of envy, but for signs, and they do not reach for approval like moths to a flame. And once you understand this, you can shape their behavior without raising your voice. This is how Machiavelli moved through the realm, government, and alliances without ever needing brute force. He allowed weak people to come to him, and then he played his role. He became a quiet listener for those who explain too much, a calm leader for the compliant, a shadowy architect for those craving attention. He did not resist their shortcomings. He gave them just enough to keep them acting, and in return, he received effortless loyalty. He gained defenders without asking for it. He received obedience without commands. This is what you need to understand if you want to become a true Machiavelli in power. The best form of control is the one they do not notice. It is when they think they are making decisions themselves, when they believe they have chosen to follow, when they take pride in serving you, not because you demanded it, but because you never had to. Let us break this down further. First, speak less than they expect. The weaker the person, the more they need verbal support. So offer silence, strategic silence. Allow them to reveal themselves. Let them speak until they feel the guilt of loyalty and admiration. And when you do speak, let your words feel earned. That single compliment, that small approval, that rare piece of advice becomes gold in their minds. They chase it. They talk about it. Now they are not just working with you. They are working for something within themselves that you have created. Secondly, be the calm in their storm. Weak people live in emotional reactivity. They panic when plans change. They overreact to criticism. They feel lost when ignored. So you do not do that. You remain composed, act with quiet intent, become the opposite of their inner chaos. This contrast makes them see strength in you. Without needing your affirmation, they begin to believe. He knows something I do not know. He controls the situation. I must follow his example. They project stability onto you because their own identity is crumbling. And as soon as they do this, your influence becomes invisible and complete. Thirdly, reward unpredictability. This Machiavellian twist is something many overlook. You do not reward consistently. You do not become a predictable source of praise or support. You become a mystery. Some days you acknowledge them, other days you disappear. Some days you nod, other days you do not even look their way. Why? Because uncertainty creates dependency. They never know when your approval will come, so they keep trying. They keep guessing. They keep talking about you. You become not just a leader in their minds, You become an obsession, and this is where true psychological power begins. Because when they start to need your presence, your guidance, your recognition, they begin to fear your disapproval. You do not need to punish them. Your absence is punishment enough. You do not need to correct them. Your silence becomes a mirror from which they cannot escape, and now they belong to you. Not through fear, not through threats, but through a deeper, subtler connection, dependency. This is the art of revealing a man's weaknesses and turning them into tools for your ascent. And the main beauty of this is that they will never understand. They will call it admiration. They will call it respect. They will believe they chose this path themselves, but you will know the truth. You noticed the cracks. You read the behavior. And while they tried to survive in the noise, you rose in the silence. Like Machiavelli, there is something he feared more than being overthrown by enemies, being betrayed by the weakness within himself. He understood what most people flee from. Weakness is not only what you notice in others, it is what you must hunt within yourself every day, because it does not come in obvious forms. It creeps in through excessive explanation, through the desire to be loved, through the thirst for applause, through the silence you should have filled but did not, through the apology you offered, not because you were wrong, but because you were afraid. Machiavelli believed that self-control is a war, a daily war, and if you lose even one battle, the world will notice the crack before you do. Therefore, he developed a system to detect weakness the moment it whispers to him in his mind. Here is how he did it. First, he monitored how he explained himself. When you are strong, you make decisions. When you are weak, you explain them. Machiavelli trained himself to notice when he started talking too much, when he repeated the same thought, when he tailored his message to the audience. He would ask himself each time, is this conviction or a plea for acceptance? And if it was the latter, he would stop because he knew that a person who seeks approval surrenders their power. Secondly, he checked how often he said yes. People think that yes is positive, but Machiavelli saw danger in it. Weakness, yes, can destroy a kingdom. Consent to avoid conflict. Consent for the sake of favor. Consent without limits. He learned to pause before every agreement and to ask, I would say yes, if I were not afraid of losing their approval. If the answer was no, he would refuse. No changes, no excuses. Because at the moment your word loses weight, you lose power even in your own eyes. Thirdly, he assessed how he felt in silence. Weak men do not like silence. They rush to fill it. They joke, give compliments, explain themselves, because silence reveals the truth. But Machiavelli made silence his weapon. He practiced it in rooms full of noise. He evaluated his comfort in it, and when it became tense, he delved deeper into it. Why? Because silence, when mastered, becomes presence, and presence, when cultivated, becomes intimidating without intention. Fourthly, he resisted unnecessary visibility. A weak man always wants to be noticed. A strong man chooses when. Machiavelli practiced invisibility. He observed how others chased attention. He remained in the shadows until all the pieces took their places. And when he finally moved, it was not perceived as progress. It was perceived as his arrival. He did not create expectations through announcement. He created them through absence. And when he spoke, when he acted, when his presence became evident, people froze. It was not a coincidence. It was crafted, honed, constructed. He eliminated all traces of weakness within himself before the world had a chance to use it against him. Because Machiavelli did not just play offense, he closed the doors through which others could break him in the future. And many certainly do not do this. They try to appear powerful, but they never ask themselves, am I chasing praise? Am I afraid of rejection? Do I speak to be heard or to be agreed with? Do I need to be loved before I start leading? Do I explain myself where silence would be stronger? These questions not only reveal weakness, they show your limits. And once you discover them, you have two options. Feed them and remain in place, or destroy them and become something the world cannot ignore. Because in Machiavelli's world, you are not punished for evil. You are punished for predictability, emotionality, weakness. So you rid yourself of it. Step by step, word by word, decision by decision. Until the day you speak and people freeze, you move and people adjust. You lead, and no one questions how you got there. Because they will not see a person trying to appear strong. They will see a person forged in silence. Respect does not demand it. It is not asked for, and certainly not begged for. It is constructed. And Machiavelli knew how to create the blueprint. He understood that the highest form of respect, the kind that does not fade in your absence, the kind that fills the room before you speak, arises from one thing. From mastery over what weak people fear the most. Weak people fear discomfort, fear being misunderstood, fear being unloved, fear standing alone in a noisy room. But the man of Machiavelli embraces this. He does not run from tension. He meets it head on. He does not crumble under judgment. He sharpens himself against it. Because when you kill the instinct to justify yourself, when you stop seeking applause, when you eliminate all traces of behavior dictated by fear, you become something alien to the ordinary person, something unsettling, something unattainable. And it is for this reason that people begin to respect you. Not because you speak louder, not because you seem pleasant, but because you reveal nothing, and that frightens them. It is human nature. We fear what we cannot understand. Therefore, when you enter a room and do not need validation, when you maintain your posture while others flinch, when your silence weighs more than their best words, you change the dynamic. You do not chase respect. You become its source. People begin to adjust their tone around you. They speak more cautiously. They weigh their words because they do not want to appear weak in your presence. Why? Because you have mastered what is inaccessible to others. You have freed yourself from the need for constant approval. You have silenced the voice that demands attention. You have found harmony in solitude, and this makes your approval incredibly rare, and rare things are always valuable. This is Machiavelli's final tactic. Make your respect precious. Do not hand it out freely. Do not flatter without reason. Do not smile for nothing. Let them earn it. Because once they realize that you do not succumb to the charms of pressure or popularity, they will be forced to meet your standards. They will rise to it or disappear. And in either case, you win. You either gain stronger allies or you reveal those who are too weak to walk beside you. So you rule not through the force that you shout about, but through the force that people feel, the one that makes them wonder why it makes them uncomfortable, why their opinion of you matters to them, what they see that you do not. This is not intimidation. It is presence. And presence is created when you eliminate every behavior that reveals weakness in them and in yourself. Because when you do this, when you cleanse your speech, refine your silence, and make your identity unshakable. You become the one who Machiavelli respected the most, a person who not only commands respect, but leaves no choice. Not through cruelty, not through fear, but through impeccable calibration. You become the standard against which they measure themselves, a mirror reflecting their insecurity, a quiet reminder that true power never needs to be presented. So let the weak reveal themselves, let them speak, let them chase comfort. And while they do that, you build in silence with precision, until one day they cannot take their eyes off you and will never understand how they lost to someone who was not even playing their game. This is the final lesson. You do not reveal the weak by confronting them. You reveal them without needing to, and that is the power of Machiavelli.